Hello there and welcome to the Impact Zone podcast. We are back once again to talk more TNA wrestling shenanigans. But, we're talking more about different things in wrestling again. And today I want to talk about the sort of idea of stopping and smelling the roses, slowing down and being present and enjoying the moments of professional wrestling, because it is one of those things that we can get very distracted with the destinations. The destination isn't always the ultimate goal in a match or in a story sometimes, or it is in many ways. But again, if you're not sitting back and actually enjoying the ride, it's like, well, what are you watching it for? And sometimes I've got to remind myself, when something is being heavily padded along, it feels like, oh wow, we're really wasting time to try to get to that kind of thing, or get back to that, or whatever it is. It's like, well, also you've got to think like, well, we've just had how many weeks or how many months or whatever it is of this thing happening, and some people are sick of it. Some people don't want to see the next bit, or they if they do want to see the next bit, they want to see it in a few months, because they want to see something else and something else and something else, and they don't want to get bored of it, or they are bored of it, and they're just kind of like, well, maybe I think I know that they're probably going to have another match, but I'd rather them have other matches and have other feuds and have other things going on in the meantime for now, even if there's a big blow-off coming, it's just one of those things that it feels like we need to think long and hard about, of saying, you need to be actually active in saying, oh, I can't forget, and it is tough, but again, it's sometimes, but it is tough to sit back and go, oh wow, where is this going, or what's next, is usually the thoughts. But it's like you've got to sit back and go, what was here that I could pull out and enjoy within this? What was here that made me, spoke to me as the fan that I am? That's one of those things that people forget about doing in this sport. It is very, very tough to forget about everything, because it is one of those things, you're always thinking, especially when you've got somebody versus a jobber or whatever, because they've got a match coming up with two sets of jobbers in the next TV episode, I believe, the Good Hands or the Great Hands versus the Aztec Warriors. And both, I think the only time the Aztec Warriors have won has been, well, they've only had one match anyway, haven't they, I think? But anyway, the only time that they've won has been in that match with Chavo Guerrero. But still, you still feel what's his name? Laredo Kid. I don't think he's being called Laredo Kid anymore. He's just being called Laredo. I think you could call him Laredo Jr. or something. I don't know. But whatever. It sort of does feel, I don't know, empty in some ways. He should have two names: Octagon Jr., Laredo Jr., Laredo Kid, something like that. It doesn't really matter, and this might be a bit more of a discussion for another time. I don't think it's that interesting. It wouldn't take that much time to discuss it. But again, it's just a little thing that sort of when you've had another name, it sort of starts being well, wait a minute, they've dropped his other name. And it sort of is, only a few people and a few sort of names can be they're a one name person. They can have their whatever you want to call it, their not gimmick name, but their sort of idea name, the Ultimate Opportunist, the Animal Batista, the Rated R Superstar, whatever it is, the Doctor of Thugonomics, I don't know, those sorts of things, those sort of catchphrase sort of titles. But again, yeah, whatever. But still, like, when I'm seeing a match like that, it's like, well, like, who's going to win here? And I kind of feel like it might be the good hands or the great hands, because it is like, well, we need more, like, though I say we need more heel teams for the Hardys, they have lost the belts, but it is like, well, we still need more heel teams, even though they've faced the Hardys before. You know, you need other people there that, you know, make it feel like the division is full, kind of thing. So, but then again, you could start saying, well, we need good babyface teams for the Nemeths. So, but that's the same sort of thing. You need a bit of both. You need a few heel teams so that you can get your good babyface teams over. And it's like, I keep saying the same sort of things where it's like, you know, they have these guys that are on the roster, and it's like, you know, like they're just being used as, you know, henchmen or whatever else it is. And they've been used as the good hands, great hands, whatever, have been used as henchmen for a long time. Lots of different alliances and whatnot. None of them have really worked out like long term or had much like going for them, and then they've gotten forgotten about, you know. And that is one of the problems of being like a lower level kind of, you know, team. It's like you're just here, or mostly just here to put everyone else over, kind of thing. You know, same with the Laredo and whatnot. They're just there kind of to put everyone over. You know, so yeah, that makes it really difficult to sort of invest in them. At least, you know, in terms of like legitimacy as far as like win rates or whatever else, that sort of thing. But like, you know, like sometimes like you gotta just admire the athleticism of these guys. It doesn't matter in some ways, whatever. You just gotta go, you know, like, even so, it is like, oh, everything's been done a million times, whatever, you know, like, it's really tough sometimes because it is a bit overexposed, that lucha style, even, you know, in the US or whatever, you know, whatever you want to call it, the X Division style, you know, or sort of, you know, the part of the pillar of the X Division style, really. So, you know, and I don't know how it is in Mexico, but, you know what I mean, it's like they watch this stuff every single, like, all the time. Like, Lucha Libre is huge in Mexico. They go to see it all the time, and every match is basically Lucha Libre. You know, like, there are some matches that are a little bit different and whatnot, but again, like, a lot of the matches fall into that sort of wheelhouse type thing and whatnot. So again, you know, I'm amazed, like, that they, you know, that how much they watch it and how much they get into it and how much, you know, there is there, because it is like, if I was seeing this the same thing every single week sort of thing, or even more, I don't know, but again, it's like, I'd be like, dude, what the heck, you know, this is, like, I want to see something else. I want to see some guy come in here from, you know, New Japan and do something else. I want to see some, you know, other guy come in here and do something else. I want to see, you know, guys with different styles. I want to see guys from Europe. I want to see guys, you know, come in from all over the world to, you know, show what their style is, kind of thing. And that's why I do love, you know, what we see, you know, in a lot of the wrestling promotions, is because it is like, wow, they're very big. They've got, you know, in terms of reality, they've got a fair amount of money in a lot of ways. So it is like, wow, now we can bring in all these other people and showcase all these different styles and all these different guys and whatnot. Even Leon Slater, though he's, you know, a X Division sort of lucha sort of style wrestler, I don't know that you could pinpoint anything that speaks to him being like a UK style or a European style or anything like that. But maybe, like, you've got to kind of bring that out a little bit more. You see it a bit in Joe Hendry with, like, the European uppercuts and whatnot. but that's not a lot of like that sort of influence. Like anyone can do a European uppercut, but again, I do feel like if you save these things for the people that, you know, say, hey, well, you know, why am I doing that? You know, it's got to be saved for people that, you know, unless it's like a certain spot and that's about it. It's like, you know, for the most part, it should be saved for the people that are, you know, European or whatever else, so that it makes it feel, you know, again, more special, more unique or whatever. And that's another thing, like that's what wrestling has to do. They have to try to figure out, you know, with your fans that are entrenched for a long period of time, how do we, you know, showcase ourselves, and how do we, you know, do it ourselves and whatnot in front of the fans that have seen everything a million times, you know, like, you know, it's great for the people, obviously, that, you know, have, well, not never, but have rarely seen things. But then again, it is tough because, again, like you have that trouble of raising the bar, so to speak, or, you know, like now next week, what are you going to do? Or next month, what are you going to do? Or whatever else it is. And that is why, again, you've got to have different styles and different things going on, and you've got to have, you know, all these other things kind of working together, you know. Like, no, I don't think it was last week, it was a couple of weeks ago, when Leon lost, I think it was like the second time he's lost to, what's his name? Brian Myers. But that was in the main event. You know, I can't remember when the other match was, but it was ages ago. Anyway, so, but that felt big because it's like, oh, they're getting the main event. You know, so it feels like, oh, well, you're trying to put Leon over either way as much as humanly possible. You know, even in loss, he, you know, got the main event, which, you know, I don't know whether you could debate it, whether that match deserved it, but they did pull a very decent match out for the main event. I think the result, perhaps some people aren't as in love with, but yeah, it's one of those things that you can't always be thinking about, you know, like every single little thing. And sometimes, like I've seen this in the interview, or a bit of an interview with Triple H, it's not like a very clear linear progression sometimes, like, and we're sort of saying, you know, like these young guys, they need wins, like a lot of the time. I have rarely seen Slater win, but yet he's not really lost a lot of stuff in terms of being over. Now, that's because they've sort of protected him, and they've kind of done things well, they've done things in the right way, by, you know, protecting him, you know, making him look good in those losses, not making him look like just a chump or whatever else it is. Plus there is that feeling of like, well, we know that we're going to be kind of rewarded. You know, TNA has, like, we've talked about this before, TNA has followed through, you know, most of the time with a lot of these sorts of things. They've, you know, when you've got somebody there and you see that they're in this angle kind of thing, you know, well, eventually they'll pay this off at some point, somewhere down the road. How, where, and when, and all that sort of stuff is, like, always questionable or whatever else it is. But still, you would say, hey, we know we can trust these guys. They're going to, you know, pull the trigger when they think it's right, or whatever else it is, or when the fans start saying, no, we want it now type thing, you know. And when is that? You know, it has to be soon, you know, like, in some ways, you know. And that's the sort of thing you've got to do. You know, you've got to say, okay, you know, maybe it's not the biggest match, and it might not be pay-per-view worthy in some ways, you know, to some people, but it is, in my opinion, it certainly is, you know, like, and getting to see that, you know, like, you start to think, like, well, what's next for him? Obvious sorts of things, but it is like, well, you know, continuous like roadblocks in many ways, because it is one of those things that finally you get to feel like, you know, this kid is going to get there somehow, some way, and we're going to see this thing that, you know, but you can't ignore the ride, so to speak, as I sort of was saying. You've got to be going, you know, how do I feel? And sometimes it is easier when you're in the arenas or whatever else it is, because as well, like, there's a lot of other people that are there that are all fired up and wanting to see the same sort of thing. So, you know, and it sort of gauges you into seeing that kind of, you know, scenario. You know, this is a clear angle, this is a clear storyline, it's been brewing for weeks and months and whatever else it is. You know, they wouldn't put, you know, like, unless you're stupid or whatever else it is, or just senile or something else or whatever else it is, you wouldn't put this much time and effort and energy into a story, into an angle, if you weren't going to pull the trigger. And that's one of those things that TNA does, you know, like, the TNA gives opportunities to a lot of wrestlers, you know, like, really, they do. And they give them that platform to be, you know, showcased, you know, like, and some people, again, like, we've talked about this ad nauseum, that some people go to WWE. A lot of people do. But, you know, it's one of those things, you can't stop people going to WWE. They're going to go to WWE. So you've just got to worry about what you can do with them. You can't worry about, well, they're going to leave us, or whatever else it is, or they don't really care, whatever. And one of these things, like saying some of the people that are there, you know, whatever, aren't working hard enough because they're not in WWE or something like that. A load of bullshit. You know, like, they work just as hard as anyone, or at least a lot of them do, you know, work as hard as anyone else, because, again, you know, you're the smaller company in many ways, so you've got to prove it even more to say, hey, you know, no, we're just as good, if not better, than what has to offer elsewhere. You know, you can't think, oh, we're just going to phone it in or whatever else it is. But that's part of the fan enjoyment as well. Like, so if you do phone it in, it is going to reflect badly on people. But if you're there and saying, okay, how can we get them? You know, how can we get the fans? You know, and it is funny, you know, like, someone saying, oh, well, it's all this stuff, you know, like, they're not doing anything special. But that's not the point. You know, they're not doing anything exciting or entertaining. They're a heel. That's the point, you know, type thing. The point is for the babyface to be the one trying to do all this exciting, cool, whatever stuff, and that's why people get behind the babyface, because they're the one doing all the cool shit. Whereas the heel is the one that's just sort of, you know, trying to stop everything and slow everything down, and, you know, that sort of thing. So I get where people are coming from when they say, oh, I don't like, you know, all that stuff. Well, that's kind of the point, you idiot, you know, like, that's what it's made for. It's made to be like, oh man, come on, I want to see, you know, this young kid, come on young kid, let's go, whatever, you know, this exciting babyface come along and do their thing, and you know, whatnot, not, oh, headlock, you know, like, you know, chin lock, whatever, you know, oh, kick to the gut, you know, kick to the leg, you know, like, you know, like, really targeting the leg for 5 minutes or whatever it is. It's about the drama, it's about the build to the comeback, it's about all these little things that you've forgotten about, or, you know, like, you've lost, you know, sort of touch with, and saying, oh, you know, I just want to get to the point, you know, type thing. And I get that, because, again, some matches can drag and can be like, oh, well, this is obvious, this person's winning, you know, but you've got to sit back again and enjoy it. You've got to, you know, remember, this is, you know, a passion, you know, as much as anything else. Why do you watch it every single week? You know, if you're bored of it, then there's something is wrong. because it is like, well, why are you not enjoying it? And even if you are watching it, it's like, how can you be continuing to tune in? There must be something that you enjoy if you're still tuning in, but you might have lost the connection to that. And as I said, it's not just down to you, it is down to the wrestlers, but they're doing the work. And you, like, if you're not invested, it is tough. So you've got to sit back and think, again, where is my investment that I had, all those years ago when I first started watching it? Where's my passion for this? And sometimes it is one of those things. I need to go away, I need to, have a break because I've seen enough, and I'm a bit bored of it. But there might be that. But again, it might be, hey, well, what, I still really want to watch it. Well, why do I really want to watch it? And it might be hard to define or hard to put your finger or your thumb on, much like a few things. But again, just looking at it and saying, well, what went wrong, or where am I at? It is that overexposure type thing, so saying, hey, I still like this, or I still love this, I still watch it all the goddamn time, and maybe I might, like I do a lot of the time, I don't pop a lot in the matches or whatever, unless somebody gets a really good near fall and I think, oh yeah, it's over, but yeah, usually I don't, because it feels like, oh yeah, that probably won't finish it, that won't finish it, that won't finish this, come on, type thing. But I've got to enjoy the ride. It's not just about they are going, in theory, going to win from that. Of course, they're probably not, but it's about the journey and about the positioning and about the psychology of it. It's all about well, they're trying to wear them down so it's easier later, or whatever else it is, and sometimes that would be helpful, again, on commentary sometimes, just getting into the weeds of why is this happening, what, and more selling of the moves or the reactions to moves and things like that. So that's where your story is. Yes, people can see kind of what people are, what's happening, but to put it into words sometimes helps, you can see the desire in young Leon Slater's eyes to not lose this match, even though he's being choked out by Brian Myers. That adds a layer to it. This kid won't quit, all this sort of stuff. Adding those layers, not just saying, oh, he comes back with the right or whatever, this kid's got to fight and he's going to throw those hands. Right and left and right and left, or something, you can do it in a few ways, but selling it more so, you're not just calling moves, you're not just saying things, you've got to have the intention of the story behind them, you've got to have the intention of the character behind them, same sort of thing. So the commentary is also another part of it, almost every element is a part of it. And something that Triple H sort of was saying, there's so many elements, to this, not just the wrestler or the commentary or the production, the lighting or the TV or whatever it is. It's the, the standards and practices. And this week, Macklin and EY are having a dog collar match. Yet last week or whatever it was, they said, oh, no blading and no, blood and whatever else it was. Though I don't know how much blood and blading there'd be in that match, but there might be some. But again, so they might have to bust each other hard way or something. But then again, it is well, in theory it was taped, I think probably before this announcement. But then again, they should have been smart and been oh yeah, we made that announcement, we've got to change this up a bit or whatever it is, or maybe it was made around the same time, I don't know. But again, they haven't, somebody was saying this as well, they haven't had very much blood or blading on the show, like, they've had recaps of people being covered in blood and things like that or whatever, but they haven't had, like, somebody bleed on the show, like, intentionally, I don't think, for a very long time. So, but yeah, I don't think that, you know, somebody bleeding or whatnot is very necessary. Like, once in a blue moon, absolutely, that's fine, when it adds to the story or when it adds to the feud or when it adds to something, you know, but it needs to be absolutely necessary. Like, again, kind of overdoing things makes them less special. And again, it's like, yeah, the network, you might feel like, oh man, the network, why do they fucking do this or whatever it is? But then again, they're trying to expand themselves and say, hey, you know, we're trying to be, you know, fit in with what the networks want so that we can get on those bigger networks, because, hey, you know, that's what we need to do, you know. And maybe eventually at some point we'll get to the point of being like, well, maybe we'll be on, you know, some streaming service and we can get away with whatever we want. But then again, we still have to remember, you know, the golden rules of saying, well, you know, it can't be too much, you know, like, because otherwise it's overexposed and overused and no longer gets the impact or whatever else that it should deserve, you know. So, but yeah, those are some thoughts I had on the idea of, like, just, you know, because I have had this problem of being like, oh man, this is a bit meh or whatever, you know, and it's not very exciting in some ways, but still you still kind of watch, you know, because that's the obsession, you know. This is what we have. This is, you know, our obsession with this, you know. So it is one of those things that is hard to put it down or hard to put it away or hard to give up or whatever else it is. That's why wrestlers don't friggin' retire very easily, because it is that addiction or whatever else, you know. Like, so it's not just as simple as saying, oh yeah, give it up, Rick, or give it up, whoever, or give it up, guy, who, you know, like, you know, it isn't. But yeah, that's the way it is sometimes, you know. So you've got to, you know, stop and spell the roses, so to speak, again, sort of what I was saying, so that you can enjoy it. You've got to find that enjoyment, that spark or whatever it is, all the time. And that is hard, you know, sometimes. And sometimes just taking that view back and saying, hey, what's going on, you know, is worth the time. So guys, I hope you have enjoyed this one as well, all about enjoying wrestling here and whatnot. So hope you've enjoyed it as well, and I hope you guys will join me again in another one.